menstruation and the fertilization. So the two main important phenomena which actually encounter in the life cycle or life history of one female, they are the menstruation and that fertilization. And menstruation is a cycle or menstrual cycle, and the result or product is during each menstruation one ovum is released from ovary, and if this ovum is fertilized inside the fallopian tube, then the fertilized ovum become one zygote, and finally this zygote grows inside the uterus, and finally it took birth as one human baby like me or like you. It may be female, it may be male. This is the product of the fertilization, and if the fertilization is not occurred, then this egg dies out. Finally this egg along with some uterine materials, blood comes out from the body, that is called as menstruation, and this cycle continues. So this was the discussion of our last class, and I hope you have absorbed all this discussion that I actually given to you, delivered to you in my last class. So now today we shall again proceed towards some most vital events which is occur or which generally occur if this ovum is fertilized inside the fallopian tube. That means ovum releases weights in the fallopian tube, especially in the isthmus area and ampullary area, and if this ovum is encountered by, united by, fused by one sperm, then the result is zygote. So today's class we shall discuss how this zygote becomes an embryo, how this zygote is nurtured inside the body of this female, which is so called mother, and finally what type of changes is actually that female feels, and finally how this zygote is nourished inside the mother's body, and finally a time will come when this zygote will parturiate out, delivered out from the female body, that is called as parturition. So today's class, in this class we shall discuss the first one embryonic development, second one implantation, third one pregnancy, fourth one placenta, and finally this will or the zygote will become a small baby, male baby or female baby, and it will took birth. So these are different type of events which actually happen, and these are the final events in that is in the heading of human reproduction, especially in female. So let us start. So first, so once the zygote is formed, we are known that this zygote is formed due to one haploid or due to union of one haploid male gamete and one haploid female gamete. That means this zygote is a single cell having diploid or diploid nucleus, very small, and as soon as this zygote is produced due to fertilization, inside this fallopian tube a series of rapid successive division occurs to the zygote, and finally this zygote become one multicellular structure. So that phenomenon which happens in the zygote, just like one mitosis cell division, is known as cleavage. So first one, embryo development or the step of embryo development or first step of embryo development starts with cleavage. So cleavage is nothing but one phenomenon, one event similar to our mitosis cell division. That means you know during mitosis cell division the parent cell or mother cell divides into two daughter cells, and each daughter cell having the same number of chromosome as that of the parent. Similarly, this zygote having diploid number of chromosomes immediately after fertilization undertakes one division, one mitotic division, that is called as cleavage, and this cleavage starts 30 hours from the fertilization. That means once the zygote is formed or once the fertilization occurred in the fallopian tube, immediately after 30 hours from the fertilization, the first cleavage starts. You just remember. For example, this is a zygote. For example, this is a cell and this is zygote. So this zygote first undertakes one cell division. So due to cell division, this zygote becomes two cell structure. This is one cell, this is another cell. So the first cleavage or first mitotic division to the zygote is nothing but this mitotic division simply divides the zygote into two daughter cells, and each daughter cell is called as blastomere. So first cleavage means first cell division or mitotic cell division to the zygote. It occurs within the 30 hours of fertilization, and this results to blastomeres. Blastomeres are nothing but they are the daughter cells produced from the zygote due to the cleavage. So result of the cleavage is the blastomeres. So this is the first cleavage, and second cleavage starts after 40 hours from the fertilization. That means after 40 hours the second cleavage again occurred to that zygote which has been divided into two cells, so that 4 cells are produced. So first cleavage 2 cells, second cleavage 4 cells. That means that cells are known as blastomeres. So generally again the third day of fertilization or after 72 hours of fertilization, the third cleavage again occurred to that zygote. That means single cell zygote, due to first cleavage 2 cell, due to second cleavage 4 cell, and due to third cleavage the 4-celled zygote becomes one 8-cell structure or 8 blastomeres are produced, and that zygote gradually descend down, comes down to the uterus from the fallopian tube. That means you should remember that first cleavage, second cleavage and third cleavage, they occurs inside the fallopian tube, and finally after that when the zygote is a 8-cell stage or zygote is of 8-stage cell structure containing 8 number of blastomeres, at that time that zygote, that means that multicellular zygote, gradually descend down, come down from fallopian tube to the uterus. So uterus is there inside the body of the female. So now at the end of 96 hours, that means after 4 days of fertilization, this 4th cleavage occurs, so that the 8-cell zygote becomes 16-cell zygote. That means 16 blastomeres are produced. So my dear student, you should remember that each time one cleavage is occurring and this cleavage is producing blastomeres. That means the product of cleavage is blastomere. So now after 4th cleavage, this zygote is containing 16 number of blastomeres, and this 16-celled zygote now completely enter into the uterus of the mother. That means uterus is there, so zygote will not stay in the fallopian tube no more. Finally in this stage the zygote will descend down and finally it will come in contact with the uterus. So when it reaches the uterus, at that time it is a solid structure, solid. That means if you imagine this is a ball like structure, this ball is divided into 16 parts. So first division 2, second division 4, third division 8, fourth division 16, like that. So 16 cell zygote, just like a ball, comes to the uterus, and finally at that time it is a solid one, solid ball, no hollow structure. So that solid structure ball, that solid structure 16 cell zygote is known as morula. Very clear, morula. So morula, this is morula. So the most important lines, most important words are being marked with red color. So third cleavage 8 cell, fourth cleavage that is 16 cell, and finally this is a morula. So morula is a solid structure, solid ball like structure, and that morula reaches the uterus. Then what will happen? So now you just see. So I have just depicted this parts, that is the theory part, in a picture. So you just imagine. So for example, this was the zygote. Due to division or due to fast cleavage, this zygote becomes two cell structure. This is one blastomere, this is another blastomere. Again, fourth, due to second cleavage, 4 cells are produced. First blastomere, second blastomere, third and fourth. So it is first day, that is 24 hours, around 30 hours, and this is around after 20 or that is 48 hours. So 7. So this is the diagram how this zygote is divided into some structurally or into some cells. They are the blastomeres. So you just see. So if this is the 8 cell structure, and finally this converts to 16 cell structure. So at the 16 cell structure, this is a compact ball, and this ball is known as morula. So this is cleavage due to cleavage blastomeres. This is 4 cell blastomere, 8 cell blastomere. Finally the 16 celled compact zygote is called as morula. So this is the diagram. Okay. Now what happens? Just after that the successive. So once the morula is formed, the successive cleavage starts. So first cleavage has completed, second cleavage has completed, third cleavage has completed, fourth started. So now in successive cleavage, so finally one by one cleavage will occur to that zygote. So in successive cleavage, 64 cell will produced. So 2, 4, 8, then 16, then 16, 32, and finally 64. So when this zygote becomes a 64 cell structure, at that time what will happen? Inside this structure there will appear one hollow cavity. It is due to, I am explaining, the volume, that means the size, the area or the volume of the zygote will remain same, but cell will become smaller. So due to continuous cell division, automatically a cavity will appear inside this 64 celled stage of zygote, and that cavity is called as blastocele. The word is blastocele. So now what happened? Due to successive cleavage, this zygote becomes a 64 cell structure. It is a ball, and that ball having a cavity internally, and that cavity is called as blastocele, and the structure is called as blastula. So first zygote, second morula, third one is the blastula. Blastula is also called as the blastocyst. It is also called as blastocyst. So other name of the blastula is also called as blastocyst. So now you see. So it is, for example, a 64 cell structure, and this is hollow, and you should remember that morula is solid, but the next one, that is blastula, it is hollow. Inside the blastula and cavity is there, that is the blastocele. So now, due to innermost cells, immediately the outer layer cell is confined, or outer layer cell form one layer, or the cells form an outer layer, and a group of cell, they will form a group or a mass in the inner of the blastocele. Just again, so when it becomes a 64 cell structure, then 64 cell structure, they will organize one outer border. So that is called a trophoblast, and some cell will be confined, some cells will be confined to the blastocele cavity at one side of the, that is wall. So that is called as what? Embryoblast. So blastocyst or blastula is composed of one outer envelope or outer envelope cells, that is called as tropoblast, and one inner mass that is called as embryoblast. So what I want to say, all the 64 cells present with the blastula are differentiated into two parts. The first part is called as the tropoblast, second part is called a embryoblast. So blast means layer. Blast means layer. So the outer layer, for example, imagine one ball. So if this is a ball, the outer surface of the ball, border of the ball, envelope of the ball is called a tropoblast, and inside that cavity, at one area, there is present a group of cells, and that cells are called as embryoblast. And you should remember that embryoblast, blast means layer. So now, side of the blastula or side of the blastocyst to which embryoblast is attached. So I shall give you the picture. So if this is the ball, so the outer border of the ball is called as tropoblast. Inside the ball, at a particular area, that area contains some cell, that is called as embryoblast. Again, side of the blastocyst, to which embryoblast is attached, is called as embryonic pole, or that is also called as animal pole. And the other part, that means opposite to that pole, is called as embryonic pole. That means you just see, if this is a ball, this area or outer envelope is called as tropoblast. Inside the cavity, for example, at that region, some cells are there. These cells are called as embryoblast, and the cells of embryoblast or the area of the tropoblast where embryoblasts are attached is called as animal pole, and opposite is called as what is embryonic pole. That means it is a polar axis. So if this is a ball, this is animal pole, and opposite to that one is the embryonic pole. So the inner mass of cell or embryo, that is embryoblast, attached to that portion of the tropoblast which is called as embryonic pole, or this is called as animal pole. Opposite to the animal pole or corresponding opposite part of the animal pole is called as embryonic pole. So that maintain one axis of the zygote or axis of the blastula. Then what these two type of cells do? Generally, the tropoblast cells, they in future time nourish or give nutrition to the zygote, and finally the embryoblast cell, they produce the embryo. That means this zygote will convert it to an embryo, and that embryo will convert it to an fetus, and that fetus will convert to an young. That means if I imagine my case, or if I tell my case, so now I am an adult. So during my embryonic stage, I was a ball, that means I was a zygote, and gradually this zygote becomes one blastula, morula, then I became blastula, then I became one, that means the blastula having one outer surface, that is tropoblast, the inner mass, that is embryoblast, and embryoblast cell gave rise to the embryo, that means I became an embryo, and finally this embryo grows and I became one fetus, and finally when fetus matures, at that time I become an infant or baby and took birth. Okay. So similarly, the inner mass give rise to embryo, whereas the tropoblast or outer mass cell, they actually provide nutrition to the zygote. Because till now the zygote, why this happens? Because till now the zygote is not implanted, it is not been given to the, or it has not been acquired any proper place in the mother's uterus. So till now this is present on the surface of the uterus. So for those days, for 2 to 3 days, they actually derive their nutrition from the tropoblast cell. So this is God gift. So now cells of tropoblast gradually differentiate into different type of membranes. These membranes are chorion membrane, amnion membrane. So laterly we shall study. That means the cells of the tropoblast later form extra embryonic membrane. They will present along with the embryo. So they will be known as chorion, and another one is amnion. So chorion membrane, amnion membrane. So they will be derived, they will be formed from the tropoblast layer. So this is all about the blastula or blastocyst. So blastula having one outer tropoblast and inner embryoblast. Embryoblast will give rise to embryo, and Tropoblast will provide nutrition to the zygote. So this is up to Blastula. Then again we shall come and we shall see the picture. You see just. So now this is the clear picture. You see. So this is that ball. What I was telling. This is that ball. You see. It is now a 64 cell stage. This is called as blastula. So this is the outer covering. So this is called as tropoblast. You see tropoblast. So tropoblast means outer layer. So now in one side, inner side of the tropoblast, there is present the inner cell mass, and that is called as what? Embryoblast. Okay. So that embryoblast, this blast. So this cell will give rise to embryo, and this cell will now present providing nutrition to this till it comes in contact with the uterus. You see, this is the uterus, and now this is the endometrium wall of the uterus. These are the blood vessels of the uterus. So finally this blastocyst will enter into the uterus, and it will be implanted into the uterus. So till age it is not been implanted in the uterus, so it is unable to derive the food material from the mother, so that this tropoblast cell will provide nutrition to this cell, because it is not getting any type of nourishment from the uterus. So now this part, that means this region where the inner mass cell or embryoblast cell is present, is called as embryonic pole, and opposite to this one is this one. So if this is embryonic pole or this is animal pole, this pole, this axis, this is the axis, or this will be the axis. If this is the embryonic pole, then this will be the abembryonic pole. Clear? So this is the polar axis. So in this picture I have shown you uterine wall. This is the blastocyst or blastula. So finally what will happen? This blastula will be implanted in the uterus, so that it will grow further, or it will go in successive division. So this is all about the zygote. So up to this I discussed fertilization occur, zygote form, zygote undertakes cleavage. Due to cleavage, the blastula is formed, and that blastula will gradually develop into further stages. So once the blastula is formed, then this blastula will be implanted, or the blastula will implant at the site of uterus. That means uterus will take the whole charge of the blastula. So that is called as implantation. That means attachment of the blastocyst to the uterine wall, specially the endometrium wall, is called as implantation. That means the blastula will be buried. It will be buried in the uterus wall. So this actually occurs on the 8th day of fertilization. Just imagine 8th day. That means so first within 30 days cleavage, then within 8 days it will become a large structure, that means a ball-like structure having 64 cells onwards, or more than 64 cells, and finally on 8th day of fertilization the implantation will occur. So how this will be implanted? So I have told you that this blastula is covered with or having one envelope, and that envelope is called as tropoblast. So during this stage, that means just after 8th stage of fertilization, this tropoblast layer will differentiate into two layers. So for example, this is the tropoblast, this is one layer. So just after 8 days of fertilization, that means when the zygote is 8 days old, at that time this tropoblast will differentiate into two layers. So this becomes two layer. This becomes the two layer. The outer layer will become the what? The syncytial tropoblast, very simple, syncytial tropoblast, and the inner wall will be the cytotropoblast. Just I am explaining, not at all, you should not confuse regarding new words, because gradually they will be absorbed by you. So for example, this is my tropoblast layer. So this tropoblast layer is differentiated into two layers. When the age of the zygote is 8 days. So now this becomes the outer layer and this becomes the inner layer. So now this trophoblast layer or outer trophoblast layer will be known as syncytial trophoblast, that syncytial trophoblast, and the inner one, the inner layer will be known as the cytotrophoblast. So it is the cytotrophoblast, and outer one is called as syncytial trophoblast. So what the syncytial trophoblast does? So just I am bringing back. So you just imagine. So this is the trophoblast. So during that period, that means during what? During 8 days. Now this trophoblast will differentiate into two layers. This trophoblast will be differentiated into two layers. The outer layer, this layer will again form another layer. That layer will be known as syncytial trophoblast, and inner one will be cytotrophoblast. Okay. So now this syncytial trophoblast will gradually grow and finally attach with the uterine wall. Understand? So this is the trophoblast. In course of time, the trophoblast will be differentiated into two layers. This is the base layer. The extra layer will gradually grow and finally, this is the gradually it will grow and finally it will come in contact with the uterus. That is the endometrium of the uterus. What I want to say that in this slide is written syncytial trophoblast invades. It will attack. It will come in contact with the uterine wall. So it will invade what? The uterine endometrium, and finally it will take its entry into the uterus. Okay. So this is the question. Actually, which part of the trophoblast is meant for invading the pathway or making its pathway to enter into the uterine wall? The answer is syncytial trophoblast. Very important. Okay. So now once the blastocyst sinks into a pit of endometrium and completely buried. So once it enters immediately inside the uterine wall, it will be buried. So now this zygote or now this blastula is no more in the cavity of the uterus, rather in the wall of the uterus. Clear? So now the blastocele or the blastocyst sinks, buried to the pit of a cavity of the endometrium and completely buried. The embedded blastocele. So if for example you see, for example, this is the uterine wall and finally this is for example zygote. Once the zygote is buried, so now it is present here. So now the outer wall of the zygote, that is the what? The trophoblast, they will form villi-like structure. So the embedded blastocele forms villi to get nutrition from the uterine wall. So the cells of the inner mass, now what will happen? Once it is buried, once it is implanted into the uterus, now the cells of the inner mass, you just remember inner mass, that is called embryoblast. The cells of the embryoblast or inner mass, they will differentiate into two layers. The base layer, that is called as hypoblast. Above that another layer will be there, that is the epiblast. So I shall show you in picture. Both the hypoblast, for example this is the embryoblast, this is the inner mass. This mass will form two layers. This is the upper layer and this is the base layer. The base layer is called as hypoblast. Upon it, this is called as epiblast. So both the hypoblast, epiblast, they are called as embryonic disc. So now again if I recall the stages, the first one again zygote, second one morula, third one blastula, and finally this blastula is implanted in the mother's uterus, and now this is known as embryonic disc. Okay, because the trophoblast is no more exist, trophoblast is converted to villi, and finally the embryonic disc, finally the embryoblast or inner mass cell will form the two layer, the epiblast and the hypoblast. These two layers constitute or togetherly form one structure that is called as embryonic disc. So this is this stage. Then come, you just imagine. So if I am now showing in the picture. For example, you see, for example, this is the ovary. So as soon as ovary releases the ovum due to ovulation, that ovum is trapped by the fallopian tube. So now once it enters into the fallopian tube, and if it comes in contact with the sperm, so now in the fallopian tube, especially in the ampulla and isthmus, this is fertilized. So male and female pronuclei unite, this becomes a zygote. So once it becomes a zygote, now immediately on day 2, this zygote divides through cleavage. So now 2 cells are produced. So now this is called a blastomere. So still it is present in the fallopian tube. Again this is on 3rd day becomes one morula, and that morula on 4th day comes in contact with the uterus. You see uterus? So you see this is the ovary, and this is the funnel, or this is the fallopian tube. Now this ovum enters into fallopian tube, it becomes zygote, gradually descend down, and this is the uterus, this part is the uterus. So now this morula enters into uterus, it becomes the blastocyst, and finally this blastocyst attached with the uterus. Is the uterus? So now it is attaching to the, in this picture here, it is attaching to the uterus, and finally this is buried, gradually buried. So now this zygote or this blastula is buried into the uterine wall. So this is the picture. That means I am just giving one idea. This is the position of the ovary, this is the position of the fallopian tube, this is the position of the uterus, and how this zygote is implanted in the uterus. This is a common picture. So you can draw in your exam. So now implantation and placentation, you just a picture. So you see again, so that picture, so this is the picture where only where the ovary, fallopian tube, uterus was there. Now in this picture I am simply giving the relationship between the uterus and the fetus. You see this is the, for example, blastula. So now this is the tropoblast, and this part is called as embryoblast, or this is also called as inner cell mass. So once this comes in contact with the uterine wall, this is the endometrium, uterine wall. So once it come in contact with the uterine wall, then what happens? Now you see in this picture, now this tropoblast is differentiated into outer, you see this is the outer syncytial tropoblast, and inner layer is there, that is you see cytotropoblast. So in this picture you see, so for example again this is the blastula, and this is the tropoblast, and this is the inner mass. Now the cells of the tropoblast at that region differentiated into 2 layers. The outer one, this one is called as syncytial tropoblast, and the inner mass remains same, or inner layer remains same, that is called as you just give a cytotrophoblast. So now what happens to this portion? So now the embryoblast differentiated into, you see this is the hypoblast and this is the epiblast, and this portion is called as what? Embryonic disc. So this is all about the implantation. That means on 8th day it is completely implanted to the uterine wall of the mother. That means there is uterus, or the uterus actually took all the charges to nourish, to develop, and finally give a proper shape to that zygote which will become a future baby. So this is all about the implantation. So from this it is concluded that implantation is nothing but this is an event during which the blastula or multicellular zygote will be buried or will be implanted in the uterus. Okay. So now the main thing is there. So what happens when this is blastula? At that time this blastula or the cells of the trophoblastic, or that is trophoblast, which forms the envelope, they secrete one important hormone. That hormone is called as human chorionic gonadotropin hormone. In short, it is known as small h, capital C and capital G, HCG. So the most important thing is that once the blastula is implanted to the uterus, now the most important or the crucial thing is that this blastula will develop and it will take nourishment from the mother's body. So to establish a relationship between the zygote and the mother, there must be one phenomenon of maintenance. Then how the zygote will be maintained in the uterus? For maintenance of the zygote or for growth of the zygote up to a certain time, what will happen? This blastula will secrete one hormone that is called as HCG, and that HCG hormone automatically stimulate the corpus luteum present in the ovary produced after ovulation, and this corpus luteum will secrete hormone progesterone. Okay, so progesterone hormone directly comes to the or directly come in contact to the uterine wall, and finally that progesterone hormone stimulate the uterine wall for more and more cell division, for proliferation, production of more and more blood vessel, so that uterine wall will become more and more bed-like structure to give nourishment to the zygote. So the main role of the HCG is to secrete or to stimulate corpus luteum for production of the progesterone, and progesterone is the hormone which is responsible to maintain the baby or to maintain the embryo inside the mother uterus for full time up to parturition, up to delivery. So the presence of, that means if one that means in case of female, as progesterone hormone is secreting just after implantation, then if one female wants to know whether she is pregnant, she is conceived, she is concepted, so that female can make one test, that is the progesterone test. So progesterone hormone will excrete through the urine. So if we make test the urine in connection with the progesterone, and if that urine suggests progesterone is present after closing of one menstrual cycle, then this female is said to be pregnancy. So hormone gonadotropin, that means human chorionic gonadotropin hormone suggests about the pregnancy. Progesterone actually maintains the uterus, then prevent the menstrual cycle. So this is all about the implantation. So once implantation occurred, then what will happen? So just after that the gastrulation will start. That means more and more cell will be produced, and finally the zygote will develop different type of tissue, and that tissue will develop different type of organs. So this process is called as gastrulation. That means the transformation of blastula or blastocyst to a gastrula is called as gastrulation. Due to gastrulation, what happens? The more and more cells which are produced due to random cleavage, they will be organized into 3 layers. That means more and more cells are there due to constant division. That cells will be organized into different layers, and that layers are what? Ectoderm, they are mesoderm, and they are endoderm. That means in case of human, or we are tripoblastic. Just after the implantation, gastrulation will start, and gastrulation is an event where blastula will acquire more and more cells. Due to enormous cells, the cells will be organized to different layers, and these layers are called as ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. Again, these 3 layers are called as what? Primary germ layer, because from these layers different type of tissues will form. That layers will form epithelial tissue, you have studied. That layers will form the connective tissue, that layer will form muscular tissue, that layer will form the nervous tissue. So different type of tissues will form from these layers. So these three layers are the primary layers, the most important layers which are formed during gastrulation. So once these layers are formed, once the layers are established, then different type of tissue will come, and that different type of tissues will form different type of organs. So finally this will become one embryo. That means this zygote will take a proper shape of the miniature human. So head will form, then the body will form, hand will form, then legs will form. So gradually it becomes a miniature baby like structure. So that is called as embryo. The most important thing is the gastrulation. So up to this what I told again. So zygote, then cleavage, then blastula, then morula, then blastula, and finally this is the gastrula. So gastrula is the most important part or most important stage of this embryonic development, during which the primary germ layers are produced. They are ectoderm, they are mesoderm, and they are endoderm, and they give rise to different type of tissues. Okay. So once the gastrulation occurred, or once gastrula is formed, or once gastrula is produced, properly implanted in the uterus of the mother, now this mother is said to be pregnant. This is the pregnancy. So in our zoological knowledge or in our zoological work, this is called as pregnancy. That means this female is carrying one baby or one embryo. So implantation of the blastocyst leads to pregnancy, and in case of human female, this pregnancy lasts up to 28, that means 280 days. That means from the day of conception, that means from the day of formation of zygote till parturition, till delivery of the baby, it takes actually 270 plus minus 7, it is around 280 days. So this time is called as pregnancy time. That means this is the, or this time is called as pregnancy, or this is called as pregnancy, the event is called as pregnancy, and the female is said to be pregnant. Okay. So this is the fourth stage. So first one cleavage, second one gastrula, then blastula, then gastrula, and finally the pregnancy. So once the pregnancy occurred, that this gastrula will become the embryo. So one error is there. Sometimes what happens, till now what is studied systematically, once the zygote is formed in the fallopian tube, this will gradually descend down and finally takes its entry or makes its entry into the uterus. So uterus is the house of one zygote. That means zygote will grow, or blastula will grow, or gastrula will grow, or embryo will be produced inside the uterus. But sometimes what happens, this zygote is remained, or the fertilization occurs other than the uterus, especially in the fallopian tube. So if this happens, that means zygote will not descend to the uterus, and finally the zygote will develop in the uterine tube. So if it happens, this is called as ectopic pregnancy. This is an error. So occasionally a fertilized egg fails to reach the uterus and implanted in the uterine tube. That is called as ectopic pregnancy. This is very fatal, dangerous if this is not treated properly. So this is all about the pregnancy. You just see in this picture, this is the uterus, this is the baby, that is, this is the what? This is the embryo, and this is the umbilical cord. I shall show you later on. So once this is formed, or once the blastula implanted into the uterus, finally a placenta is formed. So after implantation, the chorionic villi produced from the tropoblast and uterine tissue or mother's tissue, they will interdigate, and finally they will form a structure that is called as placenta. Okay. So placenta is a structure which will form due to contribution of a part from mother, a part from the fetus, that is a part from the zygote. So zygote will contribute its what? The chorionic villi or tropoblast layer. Mother will contribute, or the uterine wall will contribute its layer. So finally they will form one structure that is called a placenta. Okay. So this placenta will again communicate with the placenta will communicate with the uterus by one cord, that is called as umbilical cord. So the placenta, what actually does? The placenta facilitates the supply of oxygen and nutrients to the embryo and remove the carbon dioxide and excreted waste from the embryo. So this placenta is a communication between the blastula or gastrula and the mother. So this will provide nutrition and oxygen to the baby, that means to the zygote or to the blastula or gastrula, and finally it will bring out all the waste material carbon dioxide received from the zygote. So it also secretes the hormone like HCG, estrogen, progesterone and different type of hormones. Now parturition. Once the zygote becomes full grown or when this will become mature at the 9 month and 10 days, which is called as gestation period. Now at the end of the pregnancy, what happened? The fully matured fetus and placenta induces release of one hormone, that is called as oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone secreted from the posterior pituitary. So once oxytocin comes, finally this oxytocin brings vigorous contraction or contractory movement of the uterus, that is called as labor pain. So due to continuous rhythmically vigorous contraction of the uterine wall, now the zygote, which is completely converted to one fetus, no more remain. So in the presence of another hormone, that is called relaxin, that will relax the pelvic bones, that is the pubic symphysis and ligaments. Finally it will make one passage, vaginal passage, so that due to continuous action of the oxytocin and due to action of relaxin, now the uterine wall will rhythmically contract, that is called labor pain, and the passage will become wide so that baby will come out, that is called as parturition. Okay, so this is the baby's delivered, expulsion of the baby is called as parturition. So you see, just this is the picture. So you see, this is the uterus and this is the placenta, this is the umbilical cord, this is now baby is present here. So now this baby will come out and this is the pregnancy and parturition. Once the baby is fully mature, this baby cannot live for further step or further stage or further days inside the uterus. So finally it will be expelled out. So this is called as parturition, delivery. So now once the parturition occurs, what will happen? Immediately mammary gland of the female starts producing milk, that is called as lactation, because the baby will take the nourishment, baby will take the nutrient. So nutrition will be given by mammary gland. So this is again induced by one hormone secreted from the pituitary, that is called as PRL. So prolactin hormone secreted from the pituitary is responsible for preparation, storing of the milk in the mammary gland of the female, but oxytocin hormone is there, that will helpful for ejection of the milk from the mammary gland. So both the hormones, that is the prolactin hormone from the pituitary, that is anterior pituitary, and oxytocin from the posterior pituitary, they will combinedly act and finally they will helpful for secretion of milk from the mammary gland. So secretion of the milk from the mammary gland for nourishment of the baby is called as lactation. So that lactation will occur generally after the parturition. So lastly, so the first few days of this lactation generally contain the milk which is yellow in color and they are rich in antibodies, and that is called as colostrum. So colostrum, that means the first 2 to 3 days or first few days milk of the mother which is produced due to lactation, secreted due to lactation is called as colostrum. Gradually it becomes the milk which contain different type of minerals, vitamins, nutrition which is very much essential for the baby. So up to this, what I actually discussed, I discussed actually the development of the zygote in the fallopian tube, descent of this zygote or gradually coming down of this zygote into the uterus, so final implantation, then development it becomes one what morula, then it becomes one blastula, then it becomes one gastrula. During gastrula a 3 number of layers are produced: ectoderm, mesoderm, endoderm. These 3 layers again gave rise to different type of tissues, and that different type of tissues gradually gave rise to different type of organs, so that this will become one fetus. So you should remember that up to 2 months this is called as what? Embryo. 2 months onwards up to birth this is called as fetus, and when it will come out this will be one baby. So these are the steps, and finally once baby is born or baby is delivered, it is now the phenomenon which actually encountered by the mother, that is lactation, because baby will immediately take the nutrition. So you should remember that first nutrition to the zygote was given by Tropoblast, second nutrition during implantation this will be given by the placenta, and once it is delivered, come to the out and finally took birth, at that time this baby or this young will take its nourishment from the mother by a phenomenon that is called as lactation. Okay, thank you. I hope you have understood and absorbed this knowledge. Thank you.